Daniel, where's our baby? The nurse said you took him out of the room. Bring our son back.
Sarah,
What happened?
our baby didn't make it. I'm sorry.
Please tell me it isn't true. How are we gonna get through this?
We will find a way. I promise you, Sarah.
I can't do this. I just can't.
No mother ever imagines that the person she trusts most will become the reason her entire world falls apart. Sarah believed she had married a man who would spend the rest of his life protecting her. Instead, she married the man who sold their child. 3 years earlier, Sarah had met Daniel during a young adults' church retreat in Atlanta, Georgia. Daniel wasn't rich. He wasn't the kind of man who turned heads everywhere he went. But he possessed something Sarah admired. Kindness. Or at least, that's what she believed. He volunteered at food drives. He helped elderly neighbors carry groceries. He prayed with people who were hurting. He spoke with patience and compassion. Within 2 years, they were married. Everyone at church described them as the perfect couple. Their wedding photos remained on the church bulletin board for months. Whenever newly engaged couples asked for marriage advice, someone would always say, "If you want a marriage built on love, be like Daniel and Sarah." No one realized that behind Daniel's gentle smile was a secret that would one day destroy everything Sarah believed about love. The first year of marriage was peaceful. They rented a small one-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of Atlanta. The apartment wasn't fancy. The kitchen was tiny. The living room barely fit their second-hand furniture. But Sarah never complained. She believed happiness wasn't measured by how much money people had. Every morning before leaving for work, she kissed Daniel goodbye. Every evening she came home carrying groceries. Daniel always welcomed her with a smile. Life wasn't perfect, but it felt safe. Until Daniel lost his job. The manufacturing plant where he worked announced major layoffs. Hundreds of employees were let go. Daniel was one of them. At first, he remained optimistic. "I'll find something." Days turned into weeks. Weeks became months. Interview after interview ended in rejection. Bills piled up. Rent fell behind. Their electricity was shut off twice. Sarah quietly picked up extra shifts at the grocery store where she worked as a cashier. She never blamed her husband. Whenever Daniel apologized, she smiled gently. "We'll get through this together." Those words haunted Daniel more than any insult ever could. Every sacrifice Sarah made reminded him that he was failing the woman he loved. Then, Sarah found out she was pregnant. It should have been the happiest moment of their lives. Instead, Daniel saw another mountain of expenses. Hospital bills, baby supplies, doctor appointments. The little apartment suddenly felt even smaller. Sarah remained hopeful. Every night she rubbed her growing belly and whispered to the baby. Sometimes she laughed. Sometimes happy tears rolled down her face. Daniel watched from across the room. He wanted to feel the same joy. Instead, fear slowly replaced hope. Unknown to Sarah, Daniel had borrowed money from several people while pretending he was close to finding another job. Every loan bought him a little more time. Every loan dug him deeper into debt. Soon, his phone never stopped ringing. Collectors threatened him every day. One afternoon, as Daniel walked home after another failed interview, 3 men stepped out of a quiet alley and blocked his path. The tallest one walked toward him. "You've been avoiding us." Daniel swallowed hard. "I'm trying to come up with the money." The man smiled coldly. "No, you're making excuses." Without warning, he drove his fist into Daniel's stomach. Daniel crumpled to the pavement. Another man kicked him hard in the ribs. "We're done waiting." The tallest man crouched beside him. "You've got 7 days. If we don't get every dollar you owe us, you disappear." The 3 men walked away laughing. Daniel remained on the ground long after they were gone. That evening, he lied to Sarah. "I slipped on some wet pavement." Sarah hurried to clean the blood from his face. She gently pressed an ice pack against his swollen cheek. "You need to rest." Daniel stared at her. Even while he was lying to her, she still cared for him. Guilt consumed him. For one brief moment, he almost confessed everything. But fear won. A few days later, Sarah accompanied him to another job interview. While waiting outside the office building, she noticed a pregnant woman struggling with several heavy grocery bags. Without hesitation, Sarah rushed over to help. Daniel watched through the glass doors. His wife smiled at the stranger as if they had known each other for years. When the woman offered her some money, Sarah laughed. "No, thank you. Just promise me you'll help someone else someday." The woman hugged her. Daniel looked away. His wife was becoming everything he no longer recognized in himself. That afternoon, the interview ended in another rejection. Daniel returned home defeated. As he unlocked the apartment door, his phone rang. The caller ID displayed one name: Michael Carter, his former boss, the owner of one of the largest logistics companies in Georgia. Daniel hesitated, then answered. "Daniel." "Yes, sir. I heard you've been having a rough time." Daniel remained silent. Michael continued. "My wife and I have been trying to reach you. I need someone I know I can trust." Daniel's heart began to race. Could this finally be the opportunity that changed everything? Little did he know. That phone call would become the beginning of the darkest decision of his life. Michael Carter's voice remained calm. "I've been looking for someone I know I can trust." Daniel felt a flicker of hope. "Thank you, sir. Whatever you need, I'll do it." Michael let out a slow breath. "My wife and I have been through 5 failed IVF treatments." Daniel didn't say a word. "The doctors have told us there's almost no chance we'll ever have a biological child." Silence filled the call. "I don't need an employee right now," Michael continued. "I'm looking for someone who can point me in the right direction. We've started thinking about adoption." Grace is heartbroken. Daniel's pulse quickened. He ended the call politely, but that night, sleep never came. Michael's words echoed through his mind. "We just want to be parents." Then another voice drowned them out. 7 days, or you're dead." Daniel buried his face in his hands. He wasn't thinking like a husband anymore. He wasn't thinking like a father. He was thinking like a desperate man with nowhere left to run. 2 days later, Sarah's contractions began just after sunrise. Daniel rushed her to St. Joseph Medical Center in Atlanta. She gripped his hand through every contraction. Her face was pale with pain. "We're finally going to meet our little boy." Daniel forced a smile. "Yeah." Hours later, a healthy baby boy entered the world. His first cry filled the delivery room. Sarah cried even harder. She kissed his tiny forehead over and over. "He's perfect." Daniel stared at his son. For one brief moment, everything else disappeared. The debt, the threats, the fear. Nothing mattered. Only his son. The baby's tiny fingers wrapped around Daniel's index finger. Tears filled Daniel's eyes.
"I'm sorry."
He whispered so quietly that no one heard him. Later that evening, Sarah fell asleep from exhaustion. A nurse wheeled the baby to the nursery for routine observation. Daniel stood outside the glass window watching dozens of newborns sleeping peacefully. His phone vibrated. Unknown caller. He answered. A cold voice spoke. "You've got until tomorrow." The line went dead. Daniel stared through the nursery window. His son stretched his tiny fingers in his sleep. Daniel squeezed his eyes shut. Then, he turned around and walked away. The following morning, Daniel called Michael Carter. "Mr. Carter." "Daniel. I think I know someone." Michael listened carefully. "A young woman gave birth yesterday." Daniel swallowed hard. "She doesn't want the baby." Michael's breathing grew heavier. "Are you certain?" Daniel couldn't look at his own reflection in the hospital window. "Yes. My wife has been praying for this miracle." Every word Daniel spoke felt like another knife twisting deeper into his conscience. "I'll take care of everything." Michael immediately contacted his attorney. He wanted every document prepared correctly. He believed he was giving an abandoned baby a loving home. He had no idea he was walking straight into someone else's nightmare. Meanwhile, Sarah slowly opened her eyes. Without thinking, She reached toward the bassinet beside her bed. It was empty. She smiled softly. They must be giving him his first bath. Minutes passed. No baby. She pressed the nurse call button. A nurse entered. "Can I help you?" "Where's my son?" The nurse frowned. "I thought your husband had him." Sarah laughed nervously. "No." The nurse's expression changed immediately. She hurried into the hallway. Another nurse was called. Then another. Within minutes, the maternity floor was in chaos. Sarah's breathing became faster. Ignoring the pain from childbirth, she climbed out of bed. "My baby!" No one answered. "My baby!" Her scream echoed through the hallway. Patients opened their doors. Nurses rushed from every direction. Then, Daniel appeared. His face looked pale. He walked toward her slowly. Sarah grabbed his arms. "Where is our son?" Daniel couldn't meet her eyes.
I'm sorry.
Sarah felt her knees weaken. "Our baby didn't make it." The hallway fell silent. Sarah slapped him across the face.
No.
"The doctors said there were complications." "You're lying. They did everything they could." "I heard him crying." Daniel forced tears into his eyes. "He died." Sarah collapsed onto the hospital floor. The sound that escaped her wasn't just grief. It was the sound of a mother's heart breaking into pieces. No one in that hallway would ever forget it. 3 days later, a small white casket rested beneath a gray autumn sky. Family members and friends gathered around the gravesite in silence. Sarah stood motionless. Her eyes were swollen from crying. She hadn't slept since leaving the hospital. She hadn't eaten. She barely spoke. Daniel stood beside her wearing a black suit. His face looked just as broken. But his grief wasn't the same. Sarah believed she had lost her son. Daniel knew he had stolen him. The funeral director quietly lowered the tiny white casket into the ground. Sarah suddenly stepped forward. "I want to see him." The cemetery fell silent. Daniel's heart nearly stopped. The funeral director glanced nervously at him. Daniel quickly took Sarah's hands. "The hospital advised us not to open the casket." Sarah stared at him through tear-filled eyes. "I just want to kiss him goodbye." Daniel couldn't answer. He simply shook his head. Sarah collapsed against him, sobbing uncontrollably. The burial ended. Friends slowly walked away. One by one, the cemetery became empty. Only Sarah remained. She knelt beside the fresh grave. Her trembling fingers brushed across the tiny headstone. "I never got the chance to watch you smile," she whispered. "I never got to hear you call me Mom." A gentle breeze carried away her words. "I'll love you forever, sweetheart." Unknown to Sarah, there was no baby inside that casket. Only folded hospital blankets. Across Atlanta, inside a beautiful suburban home, Michael Carter opened the front door. Grace stood waiting in the foyer. The moment she saw the newborn, she burst into tears. "Oh my God!" Michael carefully placed the baby into her arms. Grace kissed his forehead over and over again. "Our miracle," she whispered. "Our little miracle." Michael smiled through tears. "We're going to give him the life every child deserves." They named him Ethan Carter. That night, Grace refused to put him down. She rocked him to sleep in the nursery. She sang lullabies. She thanked God for every tiny breath he took. Neither she nor Michael had any idea that somewhere across the city, a mother was crying herself to sleep because she believed her son was dead. Months passed. Daniel paid off every debt. The men who had threatened him vanished from his life. He rented a larger apartment, bought a used SUV, started a small home repair business. To everyone else, it looked like his luck had finally changed. Sarah noticed it too. She often wondered how they suddenly had enough money. Whenever she asked, Daniel always had another excuse. "I picked up some contract work. The business is finally taking off." She wanted to believe him, but something never felt right. Still, her grief was stronger than her suspicion. Every month, Sarah drove to the cemetery. She brought fresh white lilies. She sat beside the tiny grave for hours. Sometimes she talked. Sometimes she cried. Sometimes she simply sat in silence. On what should have been her son's first birthday, she brought a small teddy bear. On his second birthday, she left a blue balloon. Every year, she imagined the little boy he might have become. Daniel always watched from a distance, hidden behind the trees. Every visit tore him apart. More than once, he opened his car door, ready to confess everything, ready to tell Sarah the truth. But every time, fear stopped him. Fear of prison. Fear of losing everything. Fear of watching Sarah hate him forever. So, he remained silent. 5 years passed. Little Ethan Carter grew into a bright, kind-hearted little boy. He loved drawing superheroes. He loved playing soccer in the backyard. He laughed loudly. He hugged tightly. Every night before bed, he wrapped his little arms around Michael and Grace. "I love you, Mommy. I love you, Daddy." Grace smiled every single time. Michael kissed the top of Ethan's head. "We love you too, buddy." To them, their prayers had finally been answered. To Sarah, her heart had never stopped mourning. But fate has a way of uncovering even the darkest secrets. And after 5 years, the truth was finally getting ready to come home. 5 years had passed, but Sarah Parker had never stopped being a mother. Every morning before leaving for work, she paused in front of the framed ultrasound picture hanging on her bedroom wall. A faint smile crossed her face before tears filled her eyes. "I hope you're happy in heaven, sweetheart." She gently kissed her fingertips and touched the frame. Then she left for work. From the hallway, Daniel watched silently. The guilt inside him had become unbearable. He barely slept anymore. Whenever he closed his eyes, he saw Sarah screaming inside the hospital. He heard his son's first cry. He felt the weight of the envelope filled with money. Not a single dollar had ever brought him peace. One Saturday morning, Sarah's phone rang. It was her friend, Emily. "Sarah, I found a housekeeping job that pays really well." Sarah sighed. "I already have a full-time job at the grocery store." "I know," Emily replied. "But this family only needs someone a few days a week. The pay is amazing." Sarah hesitated. Money was still tight. "I'll take it." By then, Daniel's home repair business had become successful. Their financial problems had disappeared. But something else had disappeared too. The laughter, the conversations, the love they once shared. Sarah believed grief had changed them. Daniel knew it was the truth he buried 5 years earlier. Monday morning arrived. Sarah put on her light blue housekeeping uniform. She caught a city bus across Atlanta. She had no idea whose house she was about to enter. The security gate slowly opened. She stared at the enormous estate. It looked more like a luxury resort than a family home. She whispered to herself, "Who lives in a place like this?" The security guard smiled. "Mr. Michael Carter." Sarah thanked him and walked through the front entrance. Grace Carter welcomed her with a warm smile. "You must be Sarah." "Yes, ma'am. Please call me Grace." She showed Sarah around the house. "You'll mostly help with laundry and keeping things organized." Sarah smiled. "Thank you." Just then, a little boy came running through the hallway. "Mom!" Grace laughed. "Ethan, slow down." The little boy stopped.
I'm sorry.
Grace smiled proudly. "This is our son." Sarah looked into Ethan's bright brown eyes. For one strange moment, time seemed to stop. Her heart skipped a beat. She couldn't explain why. The little boy smiled. Sarah forced herself to smile back. "Hi there." He waved before running upstairs. Sarah watched him disappear. Without warning, her eyes filled with tears. She quickly wiped them away before anyone noticed. Days turned into weeks. Sarah and Ethan became close. He was polite, kind, always eager to help. One afternoon, he walked into the kitchen carrying a broken toy truck. "Miss Sarah, can you fix this?" She laughed softly. "I don't think I'm very good at fixing toys." He grinned. "But you're good at everything else." Sarah smiled. "Is that what you think?" He nodded. "My mom says kind people can do almost anything." Sarah reached over and gently brushed his hair back. As she did, she noticed something, a tiny crescent-shaped birthmark behind his left ear. Her smile disappeared. Her breathing stopped. She remembered that exact birthmark. She had kissed it only minutes after giving birth.
No.
She whispered. Her hands began to tremble. It can't be. That night, sleep never came. Sarah lay awake staring at the ceiling. She kept seeing Ethan's face, his smile, his laugh, the birthmark, the strange feeling she'd experienced the moment she met him. She tried convincing herself she was imagining things, but a mother's heart refused to believe it was a coincidence. The following week, Grace asked Sarah to organize several old family photo albums. As Sarah dusted one of them, a photograph slipped onto the floor. She picked it up. It showed Michael holding baby Ethan on the day they brought him home. Sarah smiled, then suddenly froze. Wrapped around baby Ethan's tiny wrist was a faded blue knitted bracelet. Sarah's heart stopped. She recognized it immediately. She had knitted 2 identical bracelets while she was pregnant. Each one carried a single embroidered word. Hope. One bracelet had stayed with her. The other had been tied around her newborn son's wrist in the hospital. The photograph slipped from her trembling hands. The room began spinning. She sank into the nearest chair.
No.
This isn't possible. That evening, Sarah quietly approached Grace. Can I ask you something? Of course. When did you adopt Ethan? Grace smiled. 5 years ago. Sarah felt her chest tighten. Where? St. Joseph Medical Center. Sarah's coffee mug slipped from her hand. It shattered across the kitchen floor. Grace rushed toward her. Sarah, are you okay? Sarah forced a weak smile. I'm fine. But she wasn't, because deep inside, she already knew. The little boy she'd spent 5 years mourning was alive, and he had been living in this house all along. Sarah couldn't stop thinking about Ethan. Every smile, every laugh, every little habit reminded her of the son she believed she had buried 5 years ago. That night, she pulled an old wooden keepsake box from beneath her bed. Inside were the memories she could never let go. Her hospital wristband, her ultrasound photos, the tiny blue knit baby cap. Then, she found it, the second bracelet she had knitted while she was pregnant. She had made 2 identical bracelets. One stayed in the memory box. The other had been tied around her newborn son's wrist only minutes after he was born. Each bracelet carried 1 embroidered word. Hope. Sarah clutched it tightly against her chest. Tears poured down her face. I knew it. My baby is alive. The next morning, she asked Michael Carter if she could speak with him privately. He noticed how nervous she looked. Sarah. What's wrong? She carefully placed the bracelet on his desk. I made 2 of these before my son was born. Michael picked it up, then looked back at her. I believe Ethan is my son. Silence filled the office. Michael wanted to dismiss it as the grief of a mother who had never healed. But something in Sarah's eyes stopped him. I know how unbelievable this sounds, she whispered. But please, let us do a DNA test. Michael looked toward the family photograph sitting on his bookshelf. He loved Ethan more than life itself, but he also believed the truth mattered. If the results prove you're wrong, I'll accept them. Sarah swallowed hard. But if I'm right, her voice cracked. I've already lost 5 years with my son. Michael slowly nodded. We'll do the test. 3 agonizing days later, the laboratory called. Sarah and Michael sat across from a genetic specialist. He opened the sealed report. His expression grew serious. The results are conclusive. He paused. Ethan Carter is Sarah Parker's biological son. Sarah broke down instantly. Years of grief exploded into uncontrollable tears. Michael sat frozen. His hands trembled. His entire world had just been turned upside down. He hadn't adopted an abandoned child. He had unknowingly raised a stolen child. The specialist quietly added, there is no possibility of error. Only one question echoed through Michael's mind. If Sarah is his mother, who stole him? Michael immediately hired a private investigator. Within days, the investigation uncovered disturbing evidence. The adoption paperwork had been forged. Hospital records had been altered. Several signatures were fake. Security footage had mysteriously disappeared. Then, one name appeared again and again. Daniel Parker. Michael refused to believe it. He invited Daniel to his office. Daniel walked in expecting another business conversation. Instead, Michael quietly placed the DNA report on the desk. Daniel looked down. The color drained from his face. Michael stared directly into his eyes. "You have one chance. Tell me the truth." Daniel couldn't speak. Michael slammed his fist onto the desk. "Whose baby did you sell me?" Daniel's knees nearly gave out. He slowly sank into the chair. For several minutes, silence. Then, he finally broke. "I was drowning in debt. They said they'd kill me. I convinced myself I could fix everything later. My wife believed our son had died." Michael stared at him in disbelief. "You watched her grieve for 5 years. Daniel nodded through tears. "I know. You let her visit an empty grave. I know. You sold your own child." Daniel buried his face in his hands. There was nothing left to say. That evening, Daniel Parker was arrested. The story dominated national headlines. People couldn't believe a father had secretly sold his own newborn son. Weeks later, Sarah stood inside the courtroom. She looked at the man she had once trusted with her entire heart. Her voice trembled. "I could have forgiven being poor. I could have forgiven every mistake you ever made." Tears rolled down Daniel's face. "But I can never forgive the day you stole my child and buried my hope while he was still alive." The courtroom fell silent. Even the judge struggled to hide his emotions. Daniel pleaded guilty. He was sentenced to decades in federal prison for child trafficking, fraud, and falsifying legal documents. As deputies escorted him away, he looked back one final time. Sarah never looked at him again. Life slowly began to heal. Ethan struggled to understand everything. One evening, he looked at Michael and quietly asked, "Are you still my dad?" Michael knelt beside him. His eyes filled with tears. "I'll always be your dad." He smiled. "Maybe not by blood, but by love." Then he turned toward Sarah. "And this amazing woman has loved you every single day of your life." Ethan looked at Sarah. "Are you really my mom?" Sarah couldn't speak. She simply nodded. "Yes, sweetheart." The little boy ran straight into her arms. She held him tighter than she'd ever held anyone. 5 years of heartbreak disappeared into one embrace. Michael watched quietly. Although the truth had broken his heart, he was grateful Ethan had always been surrounded by love. Several weeks later, while reviewing old adoption records to correct Ethan's legal documents, Michael discovered an old orphanage file. Inside was a faded photograph. A little boy, a baby girl. Written on the back were the words, "Michael Carter and Sarah Carter, brother and sister separated after their parents died in a car accident." Michael's hands began to shake. He stared at the photograph, then looked at Sarah. "Your mother's maiden name, Carter." Sarah nodded slowly. Michael held up the photograph. Tears filled both their eyes. "I've spent my entire life looking for my little sister." Sarah covered her mouth.
No.
Michael smiled through tears. "You weren't just Ethan's mother. You were my family all along." For the first time in nearly 30 years, brother and sister embraced. Daniel had spent years believing he had fooled his boss. He never imagined the man he deceived was the brother of the woman he had betrayed. Months later, Sarah, Michael, Grace, and Ethan gathered around the dining table for Sunday dinner. The house echoed with laughter. Ethan smiled as he looked around the table. "I have the biggest family ever." Grace laughed. "And the most people who love you." Sarah reached across the table and gently squeezed Grace's hand. "Thank you for loving my son when I couldn't." Grace smiled warmly. "He was never just mine. He was always yours." Some wounds never completely heal. Some betrayals leave scars that last a lifetime. But love has a way of restoring what evil tries to destroy. And after 5 painful years, a broken family finally found its way back home.